So welcome to our next lecture in the Victory Plan series, and tonight's foray is C is for compare. If in doubt, copy it out. Now, the whole point of C is for compare follows a simple thesis. There's no benefit in you reinventing the wheel. There's no benefit in you trying to do something clever when someone else has got there before you. So in reality, if we're not going to reinvent the wheel, we need to look at someone else's successes. That's going to help us get through the planning system faster because we're essentially just giving the planning authority something they've already seen before. And moreover, it's going to give us some certainty on build cost, on end development value, and on acceptability. So C for compare falls inside the Victory model, of course. And the thing is that planning is one of the few academic disciplines where you're actively encouraged to use good examples of development within the surrounding area. It really is a discipline where you're encouraged to cheat. You're encouraged to look over your neighbours' answers, check their exam paper, copy the maths exam, and do exactly the same thing again. And you're encouraged to do it because you already know it's been approved. You already know it's fine. So why reinvent the wheel? Examples that you copy need to be recently approved. So what do we mean by that? Well, put it this way, planning authorities can go through personality changes. They can go through staff changes, but they have to be consistent with themselves. And what we're looking for is levels of consistency in planning decision making. So you need a recently approved decision and ideally recently built out to show the council that you're basically just copying. And then finally, these decisions tell you the personality of the council by their decision-making behaviour. I'm going to deal with that very succinctly inside that lecture. What do we mean by decision-making behaviour? So let's break this down a little bit. So C for compare falls into 4 discrete blocks. The planning personality, so that is all about that decision-making behaviour set. Is there something the council likes or doesn't like? Is there a particular style they're going to follow? The development typology, that's all down to what is successful in that particular area. Different areas have different drivers for change. And so development typology is about tuning into those drivers. Gross development value metrics. How do we value development? How do we use those comparables that are available to us to get a better steer on how well a particular property is going to do? And build value metrics, again, using local knowledge and experience and moving away from the generic pounds per square foot into something a bit more nuanced. That's something I really want to drive through today's lecture is moving away from a generic idea of pounds per square foot and into something a bit more tailored to your area, gives you a better bead on whether or not your development is or is not achievable. So I want to deal with planning personality first. Every planning authority has a personality. So here is our friend Donald Trump here, just been evicted from his house, as far as we can tell. And he has a personality that drives the American government. There's no difference between Donald Trump and the leader of a council, the political leader of a council. That political leader will drive certain forms of development, will drive a form of behaviour in that planning authority against or for certain types of development. I'm often reminded about what's going on with one of my own developments right now, Raglan Gatehouse, where the leader of the council, the leadership itself, is driving that development forward because they want the development to happen. And that trickle down approach, that top down approach of planning leadership has an effect on individual planning decisions. Planning is not this quasi independent activity. It is a political activity as well as capital related activity, capitalist activity. Now, every planning authority has a personality. That's why you can't do things generically in the planning world. You can't make an assumption that one authority will take a view on development that's the same as another authority. They all have their own personality. Now, we reveal this personality with decision-making behavior. One of the great challenges right now about the new permitted development rights, the new Part 20, is that we have no decision-making behavior. We simply don't know how planning authorities are going to behave or react if they get presented with one of these permitted development solutions. That reaction is revealed through the decision-making behavior, the pattern and chain of behavior over a course of time. What some people might say, oh, this is the way we do it in Winchester. Might be very different to the way they do it in Woking. I've given some examples here of what I mean by ingrained decision-making behavior. And I just want to talk through exactly what is going on here. Now, this is a cluster of authorities that we've worked with. So we've worked with each one and we've established a nuanced behavior, a personality that lives behind the planning officers. So let's just deal with them. So Kettering Borough Council in Northamptonshire doesn't believe in permitted development. In fact, they really don't believe in permitted development. We've had arguments with pretty much every level of that council where they really don't take into account what you can do under PD. They've been to appeal where they really don't take into account what you can do under permitted development first. And so their personality is very much a case of, well, what's permitted development? It doesn't matter to us. If you give us a planning application, we'll deal with it as a planning application. We're not even going to look at what permitted development is. That's their personality. That drives almost the way you deal with certain application types and pushes you down permitted development routes where you might otherwise not go. One particular example I have with Kettering is Montague Street, where it took an application after PD had been used, but to persuade that council that the permitted development solution even existed, even though they had approved a prior approval. In Winchester City Council area, we have what's called the Winchester Way. Now, the Winchester Way is very different to every other authority, where every other authority in Hampshire is governed by ideas of betterment. Winchester is governed by ideas of the status quo. So they want to maintain the status quo. They don't want modern design, they want traditional design. They don't want really pretty, high quality, high design buildings. They want thatches and cottages and prettiness and Britain of the 50s. That's very much driven by their councillors. The Winchester Way comes down from the councillors. I got involved with Winchester on enforcement matter where an applicant had removed the thatch. Woe betide him for removing the thatch off his house and replacing it with tile. And when I asked the enforcement officer, well, why are you taking action? It's PD. He said, but that's the Winchester Way. We'll take action because we like the thatch. Even though we think it's permitted development, we'll still take action and let the inspector tell us otherwise. Southampton City Council's decision-making behavior set is very much, we hate HMOs. They really hate HMOs. They really, really hate HMOs. And they'll find any reason to refuse an HMO. That's a decision-making behavior set, and it comes down from their councillors. So when we're dealing with HMOs in Southampton, we're already gearing up for the appeal. We already know what we're doing there. Portsmouth City Council hates dormers, absolutely hates dormers. So dormers have to be done through permitted development. They can't be done through a planning application. If you want a big dormer through a planning permission, forget it. You need permitted development in order to get you dormers. Barrow-in-Furness Borough Council up in Cumbria doesn't need affordable housing, according to them. They fervently believe that their area is affordable enough, and so they don't need affordable housing. They just ignore it. Their policy is actually affordable housing 0, which is quite surprising considering the area, but that's their personality. No affordable housing needed in Barrow. Finally, Doncaster Metropolitan Borough Council, their personality is very much, it doesn't matter what the inspector says, we'll do what we want to do anyway. So we got into a discussion with Doncaster about flexible changes of use, and we provided 3 or 4 inspectors' decisions, all saying you could do a flexible change of use. Doncaster's view was, doesn't matter what the inspector says, we're going to do it the way we want to do it. That is planning personality for you. That is knowing your individual authority, and goes back to my original thesis of, if in doubt, copy, but moreover, don't try and copy in a different area. Don't try something in Southampton that you would otherwise try in Winchester. Now we can reveal planning personality, and we do it through history search. So in the last lecture, we looked at how to history search to gain intelligence. Now we're looking at history searching in a different way. We're looking at history searching in order to reveal planning personality. Who is being successful and who is not? Now I've done a quick history search here. I've whacked some images on the screen for you for HMOs, Class C4. And you can see there's 713 entries that come back off that search, giving me examples of HMO applications that the council has dealt with. That is a really important data set for me, because that data set tells me exactly what to do and exactly what not to do. I need to look at the positives and avoid the negatives. So I need to look at exactly what has got planning permission and duplicate that. The old adage, repeat to compete, actually does work with planning here, because what you're doing is you're repeating the success of others. It's no surprise that most applications that are successful all look the same. They're following the personality. If we do another search, this one for the change of use of an existing building to form 2 houses, this was a conversion. This search only revealed 1 application. That's all it revealed to us. That doesn't give us a lot of data at all. But importantly, this was an approval, so we can still look at it. We can still understand exactly what went right in this application process. It reveals a little bit of the personality, something to duplicate. That's planning personality for you. It's one of these weird things when you're thinking about comparing your development to others that really focuses the mind. It really focuses on the idea that you should specialize in a single area, or you should specialize in sole areas. You don't need to branch out significantly, because you can't learn the personality for all 300 odd planning authorities in the country. So learn the personality for one, get really good at it. As I said in the first lecture, learn the rules like a pro, break them like an artist. Learn the personality like a pro and tie in. Let's move on to ideas of development typology. So when we're talking about development typology, and I'm sure you've noticed this, there is very much a pattern of development that goes on in certain areas. There are certain development types that really hammer home. People do them over and over and over again. And there's a reason for this. Big developers don't spend time, effort, or money on bad developments. They don't waste their time on bad developments. They do their homework on the development typology that is going to sing in that area, that's really going to work in that area. They look at the history, they look at the background, they get all that intelligence that we spoke about last time, and they look at documents like this. So the document that I've got displayed is for the London Borough of Hillingdon, and it is the Strategic Housing Market Assessment. Now, these pieces of work are incredibly expensive for a council to put together. It can cost between £75,000 to £100,000 for a council to put together a piece of work like this. And normally they go out to major research companies like Opinion Research Services, or people like Savills or Knight Frank. Now, what I've drawn here is what's called the objectively assessed need for housing. And I've highlighted what's going on in Hillingdon. So Hillingdon needs 3-bedroom homes like you wouldn't believe. If you look at the figures there, 1-bedroom homes, 2014 to 36 is not much of a rise. 2-bedroom homes, 14 to 70,000, that's not much of a rise. 3-bedroom homes, they need 41,800 in 2014, and that needs to go up to 57,200 in 2036. So they need the difference of 15,300 extra 3-bedroom homes in that period. Now, I don't know about you, but that's saying a lot to me. That's giving me a lot of information about the kind of development Hillingdon wants to see, or moreover, needs to see. I'm using council's own evidence. If I move to the affordable housing table, it also tells me what affordable housing they need. It tells me how I can rig the game in my favour, how I can twist the affordable housing that I provide to give them something that they want. I might choose to keep all the 3 beds for myself, thank you very much, because they need that for your market housing, and I give them all the 2 beds for them because they're slightly cheaper and because they need that for their affordable housing, because we're using the figures that they provide for themselves. We can also look at weekly lists. So weekly lists give us a really nice, concise list of everything that's been approved in the last week. So this one's a small excerpt from South Norfolk Council, and it's telling us a few bits and pieces. So we've got home office development here, erection of cart lodge to include adjustments to a fence line. That's not that interesting. Barn withdrawn, that might be quite helpful, really, because that's barn conversion. But moreover, what it allows you to do is draw patterns. So what we can look at is, well, are we getting a lot of one type of application? And what is that application doing? And it does it in a really concise list. Now, search, just Google your council weekly list, and it'll get you to their website that gives you this level of data. What we're doing, remember, is using the council's homework against the council, or more importantly, using their development typologies against them. If in doubt, of course, if ever in doubt, copy it out. So what we're looking at here is prevailing character of a street. Nice big detached properties. There's one there that's pretty shonky, and then there's another one there, pitched roof, another one there with pitched roof, another one there with a pitched roof, etc., etc., etc. To fill in this hole with a detached building, detached house would not look out of keeping. To fill in this hole with something that replicated pattern here or pattern here wouldn't look out of keeping. The council probably wouldn't even say boo to that. But what we're doing is we're just following pattern. We're copying our neighbour's homework here. The beauty about doing this, as we'll go on to see, is you can then look at metrics. You can look at values comparable to what you're actually trying to do. You're not trying to twist a comparable. You're just looking at what's going on in the street. Of course, if there's no character of multi-story, then don't try and do one. If the character is all houses, even the estate agents will probably tell you to do houses. If the character, on the other hand, is like this in the middle of Woking, and the policy says build me lots of flats, and the pattern of behavior, the development typology says flats please, thousands of them, then that's exactly what you should do in order to have an easier route through the planning system. This is the very center of Woking, and here you see on the screen 4 blocks of flats, 3 of which hitting 33 stories in height. Woking for the last few years has focused its entire development typology on flats. Its entire development metric has been on flat conversions and flat new build. And this is what's happened right in the middle of the town. The policy says build me lots of flats. The development typology is we're building lots of flats. Granted, at some point there'll be a breaking point, and at that breaking point there'll be this change where actually it's not flats anymore, it's something else. But this is what's going on in Woking right now. Why reinvent the wheel? Moving on, we're going to look at GDV metric. Bear with me 2 seconds. So gross development value metrics are there to help you come to an understanding about whether the site is doable or not. Now, GDV metric is an important test, and I'm going to show you where we take our GDV metrics from in an aggregated model. But it's important that you do GDV metric because what you're trying to do is establish right away whether or not it's worth you even pursuing the site. As a planning consultant, as I'm sure you probably will gather, I see a lot of planning applications and a lot of development. And the biggest, most common problem I see by a country mile is a property speculator coming to me with an application that's been done, it's been dusted, and they will turn around and say, I cannot make the numbers work. I need to get more on the site. Or they put in for the wrong thing. It works better with flats than it does with houses, or it works better with houses than it does with flats. And that's because not only was the typology wrong, but the GDV metric was wrong as well. So gross development value, and this is from the Planning Advisory Service. So this is not my words. This is taken from the Planning Advisory Service guide to planning officers on what GDV actually is. So gross development value, or GDV, is the forecast revenue or sale that is anticipated from a development scheme. From this value, the most important valuation metric for a property developer is probably the percentage profit on GDV. This calculation is effectively whether a development has or will turn a profit at completion. Profit on GDV is calculated by assessing the cost of development versus the sale of the completed properties to create a total profit value, which is then calculated into percentage terms. So understanding our GDV metric is almost vital. As I'll go on to show when I'm talking about development costs, understanding our profit on GDV is almost one of the first things you need to deal with if you're a new developer. So again, this is an example provided by the Planning Advisory Service. Development of 5 houses which sell at 200,000 each. Overall cost in funding, land and acquisition, construction and sales are 750,000. GDV is therefore calculated as below. So it's £1 million worth of GDV. That's the gross development value of all of the houses added up together. The cost is 750, the profit is 250, and the profit on GDV is 25%. Now, The Planning Advisory Service and I agree wholeheartedly that you calculate GDV by running an analysis of forecast and of cost and sale. So you look at cost and sale first, taking into account profit. Profit is a cost as far as the GDV metric is concerned. Always take profit into account when you're calculating out your GDV. This creates an analysis of the property transactions in the area and of the development cost, etc. Now I'm going to go into development costs in reasonable levels of detail, showing you where you can pick out individual pieces of information on development cost. But I just want to talk about where we get this initial figure from, this initial idea of GDV. And I use a macro to micro scale approach when I'm looking at this. So you have a starting valuation which starts from well-known aggregator tools, Land Insight, Nimbus Maps, etc., based on pounds per square foot in the area. You then refine that using sold prices for that area. Again, you can get those from the aggregator tools, or you can get them from places like Rightmove. But I'll talk a little bit about the safety net you need to build in. And then finally, an agent's valuation, but not just one agent's valuation, 3 agents' valuations, because what you need is a mean average. You need to be ultra safe in today's market, and that gets you to your NGDV valuation. I don't know of many people that tell you to do this 3 times, but it's about whittling it down and whittling it down and whittling it down to make sure this is as close to reality as you can possibly get. So aggregator tools such as Nimbus give us the country chopped up into zones where you have an average pounds per square foot per zone. Now, it is fair to say that you should always take these averages with a massive great pinch of salt. These averages are right at the very top of the scale. They're a rule of thumb only, and they're a rule of thumb only because they are sometimes spread over massive areas. This £232 per square foot, this is Plymouth by the way, this £232 per square foot covers a massive great area and may only cover 3 or 4 massive properties with some small ones built into the mix. Your £301 per square foot here is partially heritage coastline, so not many buildings down there. Whereas coming more into the centre of Plymouth, you have a wide variation in values depending on exactly where you are. 146 for Devonport, down in the Barbican in the city centre, 177, 200, roughly in the middle. But take these values with a pinch of salt. They should be good steers as to where the best values might be found, but they shouldn't be used as an absolute value for GDV. For that, we need other forms of assistance. So we can look at sold prices. So again, I've stuck with Plymouth, and I'm now looking at sold prices for properties in Plymouth. Now, all of these properties are in this area. They're in this £167 per square foot area right there. And these values are pretty spectacular. Some of them are anyway. But then look at what's going on. A 1-bedroom apartment in Admiralty House, 195,000. A 3-bedroom inter-terraced house in Pembroke Lane, 195,000. A 4-bedroom townhouse for sale, 190,000. What's going on here? Now, interestingly enough, this is a real thing that is happening in Plymouth right now. The sold prices are indicating a desire, a demand for certain types of property over other types of property. Pounds per square foot, flats, a 1-bed is getting a much higher pound per square foot than a 3 or 4-bed house, because there's an overriding desire for flats in certain locations in Plymouth over houses. That's about knowing your market. If we move then to what Nimbus tells us, Nimbus helps break this down a bit further by helping us understand what we're looking at. Now, again, I would only ever look at this year's data. And I think the reason for that is fundamentally clear. We've just gone through COVID-19 and we're still going through it now. We're likely to see some form of a reduction in house prices nationwide. We are looking at possibly another lockdown after Christmas, if they give us Christmas at all. So in reality, there's no point in looking at the more opportunistic or optimistic times in 2018 or 2017. Just ignore those. I'm looking at the last year's worth of figures. And again, they tell a massive story. So this property on Washbourne Close there went for £75,000 for a 1-bedroom flat. That is a 1-bedroom, there it is, bedrooms, flat, 511 square foot, £76,000. That certainly is telling me something. That's telling me that in Washbourne Close, this area, flats are probably not worth doing, looking at the values and the size per square foot. Looking up here, Fall Street, this is a house. It doesn't tell me the bedrooms, but it certainly tells me the size, 136 square meters, 1,369 square feet. And that's giving me a decent price metric, £207,000. That's telling me quite a lot. The value is in the bigger properties in that particular area. Finally, we come to agents' valuations, and this is really drilling down into the macro scale. And this is one of my developments. This is the Mount. So this gives you an idea of what another part of the city is looking at. Now, we went to 3 estate agents to get 3 valuations for each one of the flats that we were producing, 17 flats in total. And we've got the square footage there, and we have our target price, what we wanted to see, and 3 valuations on what the estate agents were putting together. They're not that far off. 2,686, 2,692, 2,554. Not that far off at all. In fact, the average is somewhere in the 2,600,000 dead mark. But those 3 valuations give us much more in-depth, on-the-ground data as to what estate agents think properties will actually go for in reality. And that is the basis upon which we did our GDV metric. Finally, I'm going to talk about build costs, because build costs are something that is a personal bugbear, I'm going to say. And it's because of this. You will see, I'm sure, reference to generic pounds per square foot. A pound per square foot value that you can do anywhere in the country. London, Manchester, Dumfries and Galloway, Exeter, generic. And it normally floats around the £150 per square foot mark for new build, and 100 or thereabouts £100 per square foot for conversion. Now, I can tell you exactly what the City Council told me in Plymouth. Their current conversion pounds per square foot that they work to, based on their data, is £160 per square foot. To convert a building, £160 per square foot. To new build a building, they're currently looking at £130 per square foot pre-COVID. Those are very, very different, as I'm sure you'll agree, from a generic pounds per square foot metric. And that's because the cost of build varies wherever you are in the UK. There are regional variations which drive the cost up or down. And that's why having a real knowledge of where you are and what you're looking at, and moreover, what someone else's development down the road costs to build is really important. So some of the key costs to developers I've put here, and again, this has come from the Planning Advisory Service. So this is used by planning officers to assess viability. We've got construction cost, of course, site purchase, planning costs, abnormal costs, so flooding or demolition or remediation, contamination, ecology, professional fees, finance, sales costs, contingency, and of course, profit, because profit should always be built into a developer's cost model. Dealing with construction costs, one of the greatest resources we have is called BCIS, the Building Costs Information Service. And happily, I can tell you that there are a number of different websites on the internet, home building and renovating being one of them, that taps into BCIS for you in order to give you a building cost for a new build. In this case, it's a self-build. Now we can use this to understand what the current building cost index is for our particular area, and it gives us a bit more of an accurate figure than £150 per square foot. Using this, we calculated that in London, certain parts of London on the outer edge, you're looking at £210 per square foot at the moment, and we double checked Plymouth's figure of 113. It was pretty much bang on correct. So that's how we get some more detail on construction cost. Site purchase is always a negotiation. So site purchase is always there as a negotiation between the parties and should always be factored in to your overall cost to work out your profit over GDV. But don't forget, site purchase is not a fixed figure. You should always negotiate down because your vendor will negotiate up. So you want to start low and aim high. They want to start high and aim low. The reality will be somewhere in the middle. I was told a brilliant quote a few years ago, if your offer value is not making you embarrassed. So if you're not going red in the face when you say what your offer value is, then you're offering too high. Go lower, get to the point where you feel embarrassed. What's the worst they're going to say? They're going to say no. Or even worse, they're going to say yes. And then you have to deal with it. Planning costs are happily fixed. So planning costs are here to deal with fixed costs of the planning system, and we can work them out. Now, planning fees, there is a guide for this. It's the planning fees for applications in England. There are different guides for Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, but it gives you an idea. And here we have, for example, the cost for new houses. No more than 50 new houses, it's going to cost you £462 each per house. That needs to be bundled into your calculations as a cost. Again, it's not just about pounds per square foot. It is about having a more nuanced approach to this. In terms of planning costs, we also need to factor in CIL. I want to talk about Community Infrastructure Levy a little bit because we are facing down the barrel of the government bringing out a national Community Infrastructure Levy. But one thing that needs to be said here is very clear. Each council that has CIL has a document like this, the charging schedule, and it tells you exactly what they're going to charge per square metre. However, and here is the big however, these were the figures when this document was originally released in 2013, and CIL is added to every single year with the rate of inflation. Rate of inflation at the moment is about 2.1%. So next year, another 2.1% will be added, as has every year since July 2013. That's 8 years of 2.1%, raising the level of CIL, in this case for houses, probably well over the £100 per square meter mark. So don't take these figures as gospel. If in doubt, email the councillor and tell them what their yearly figure is, what their current year's figure is for CIL. They'll be happy to tell you, because essentially you're going to pay. You have to pay. Abnormal costs like flooding, demolition, remediation, contamination, and ecology, you can find out if you're in one of these areas by using any of the amount of tools that are available to the property developer. I'm going to show you a couple just for completeness. So let's start with demolition. Here is a beautiful old building that we've decided we want to take a bulldozer to, because let's face it, there's some trees growing out of it there and there, and there's some more over here, and the building's probably shot. Demolition costs, you can go and get a quote from a demolition company and expect, if you've got any asbestos in there, to send that quote upwards. There isn't a generic rule of thumb of pounds per square foot demolition, because it really does depend on what's going on inside the building. But if you are demolishing an old building, get a quote as part of your deal analysis. How much is it going to cost to take this building down? I'm not going to tell you to use generics, because there shouldn't be a generic for demolition. Don't forget, of course, if you've got any original features in this building that you can save, you can have them reclaimed, and having those features reclaimed, sending on to a reclamation company to be then sold on, is actually a net benefit to you as well. Don't just take a bulldozer. Flooding, as we see here, this is the city centre of Oxford. Who knew that Oxford was so bad? This is actually around Oxford mainline railway station. It's easy to find out. We have the National Flood Map for Planning, which uses your postcode. So give it your postcode, it will tell you what your flood risk is. Zones 1, 2 and 3 are going to incur costs on flood risk. Zone 1, you should be absolutely fine, but zones 2 and 3 are going to incur those costs on flood risk to provide evidence and mitigate around it. If you're in zone 3, that you could be looking at lifting up the height of the building, or nullifying your ground floor, or putting parking in your ground floor as a way to get yourself around it. Ground contamination, historic use of land, is again easy to work out, because we have these amazing resources online like old maps. This is the 1800s map of where my office is, and my office is in here where there used to be terraced houses. Now there isn't, but this is where my office is now, and where these houses are not. We can look and see what's going on here. We've got a railway line, that's going to give us some contamination. We've got some made land over here, that's going to give us some contamination too. We can work these bits out just by what we see. There's no rocket science here. It's about understanding what's going on your land and drilling through the history a little bit to understand what's going on in this area. When it comes to professional fees, it's all very much of a muchness, but I've given some indicative ideas here from recent quotes we've had for dealing with work in the UK. So for a planning consultant, it wouldn't be unreasonable to expect between £1,000 to £2,000 upwards to deal with small householder development or small housing schemes. That wouldn't be out of kilter. An architect is going to charge you between 1% and 3% of the build cost. No wonder that architects always seem to want to push the amount of development on the land upwards. 1% to 3% of build is where they're going to probably be. Highways consultant, recently we had a quote for our 17-unit scheme in Plymouth, and it was about £2,500. That's about ballpark for a 17-unit scheme where they need to do some flow modelling, etc., etc. Tree consultants, you're looking about £2,000 upwards, depending on how much investigation is needed. Ground contamination, again, if you need to dig boreholes, you're looking about £2,000 upwards. Flood risk assessments and flood modelling, in today's money, if you go to one of the major consultancies, you're looking at about £4,000 upwards. And these are all costs you need to build into your professional fee calculation. A recent quote we have for Section 106 mitigation, if you want to zero out your Section 106, you're looking at about £6,000 for a report for one of those. And heritage consultant, anything from about £1,500 upwards for a really decent consultant. The message I want to give here, though, is don't cheap out. So don't think you can avoid one of these, because it will always come back to bite you later. If you try and avoid ground contamination, you'll get it on conditions. If you try and avoid heritage, for example, it'll come back and get you in the planning application. Section 106 mitigation, it's a choice of that or paying a Section 106 contribution. So again, it always comes back and gets you. Finally, I just want to talk a little bit about profit. So post-COVID factors for profit, please factor in at least 30% of GDP. At the moment, what we're seeing is a marked change in what's going on in the private financial sectors for the desired profit margin or the desired safety margin. So what we're now seeing is people starting to get closer and closer to the 30% of GDP in order to feel safe. Long gone are the days where 20 to 25% was considered to be safe. Councils will look to a minimum of 20% for you to avoid affordable housing. That's where they are. So that's how much of a difference there is between where the council still is, council being slower to respond to market, and when the market actually is. But post-COVID, and certainly in the short to medium term, we would suggest a 30% GDP to profit ratio is where you should be aiming in. That's one of the key costs you need to factor. So coming to the end of this lecture, then I just want to sum it all up. So when we're looking at compare, we're looking at 4 things. We're looking at that planning personality. What do the council like? What do they not like? And if in doubt, copy. If in doubt, copy someone who's been successful. We're looking at development typology metrics. We're looking at what the council actually needs rather than anything else. Because at the end of the day, if the council is saying we need 3-bedroom houses like they're going out of fashion, that's because they've already objectively assessed that they need 3-bedroom houses like they're going out of fashion. And that means you being able to sell 3-bedroom houses goes up because there's going to be a market demand for them. Check that GDP metric against top, middle, and bottom. So check it against the aggregator, check it again against your sold prices, check it again against your agents. It's almost a case of measure 3 times, do the development once, but check, and check again. And then finally, compile a tight list of your costs. Don't be so reliant on a generic pounds per square foot to get you through, because you don't know that until you've tested it multiple times. And finally, be negative. You're allowed to at this stage. It is better to walk away from a highly marginal deal than to take on a highly marginal deal and then really struggle to find it out for it at the back end. So my challenge for you guys on the back end of C is for compare. Take that development project you're looking at and see what's going on in the area. Are you meeting the personality, the development typology metric, the GDP metric, and the cost metric in order to get a development that works? It may take a little bit of time to do this, but if you get it right, then you'll have something you can repeat over and over again.